Welcome to today's story. I hope you enjoy it. Remember that if you do enjoy the story, to like and subscribe for more content like this, and please let me know any suggestions for stories you might want to hear in the comments below. Happy listening. Chapter 1. Respectability on Credit. The Whitcomb drawing room looked proper at a glance, which was the point. Pale curtains framed the windows, though the cloth had thinned near the folds. The rug showed a faint patch near the hearth, where the colour had worn away. A vase of late roses sat on the side table, heads trimmed short to seem fuller. The fire in the grate had been allowed to sink low, more glow than heat, so the coal might last another day. Mrs. Whitcomb sat upright on the sofa with her back straight as a rod, her hands folded over mended kid gloves that lay in her lap like something at rest. "One must never give way," she said, "not for the first time that evening. People see what we show them, nothing more." Eleanor poured tea from the pot, careful to tilt it slow so the thin colour would not be noticed. She had warmed the cups well to keep the steam thick. The tea had been used once before, though she had added a pinch of fresh leaves to the strainer. Her own gloves, set beside her plate, bore neat stitches along the thumb where the seam had split. She had turned the mend inward so it would not catch the eye. Across from her, the coal bill lay tucked beneath a book of sermons on the small side table. Only the edge showed, a corner of stiff paper that refused to lie flat. A knock came, too quick and uneven. Henry entered without waiting, hat in hand, hair damp with night mist though it was not yet late. His smile was bright and thin. "Evening," he said, then saw their faces and softened his tone. "I hope I do not disturb." He did not sit at once. He paced to the window, peered through the lace, then turned back. "I have had a bit of trouble. Nothing grave. A small sum, only delayed." Mrs. Whitcomb lifted her chin. "Of course. Such matters resolve when one keeps calm." She did not ask the sum. She did not look at the bill under the book. Eleanor set a cup before Henry. His hand shook when he took it. Tea sloshed onto the saucer. He laughed too loud. "I shall settle it within the week." He did not meet Eleanor's eyes. She knew the tone. She knew the gap between his words and the truth. They spoke of calls to be paid, of a recital at Lady Penbury's, of gloves that might be whitened with chalk. The room held its shape through habit alone. When Henry left, he pressed Eleanor's hand at the door. "I am sorry," he said under his breath, then was gone into the damp street. Mrs. Whitcomb remained seated, gaze fixed on the fire's red line. "We must not slip," she said again, softer now. After the house went still, Eleanor waited in her room until the hall clock struck 12. She changed into her dark walking cloak and tied the hood close. She drew on her gloves, though she knew what lay beneath would show through by the end. From her desk, she gathered the packet of pages, tied with twine, the paper thick with ink and close lines. She held it a moment, then slipped it under her arm. The stairs gave a small sound under her step, but no door opened. Outside, the fog lay low along the street, a grey drift that softened edges and swallowed lamps to halos. Her shoes made little sound on the damp stones. A cart rolled past once, wheels slow, driver a shape without a face. She kept to the side, head down, breath steady. At the corner she paused to let a pair of men pass, their talk rough and quick. They did not glance at her. She walked on. Harrow's office stood off a narrow lane, the sign plain and dark. Light showed at the edges of the door. She knocked once. It opened at once, as if he had been near. Felix Harrow wore his coat open, sleeves rolled, ink on his cuff. He smiled when he saw the packet. "Right on time, miss." He did not finish the name. He never did. He took the pages with care, thumbed the top sheet. "Blackwood sells well. Better than last month. We shall need the next part soon." "I will have it," she said. Her voice sounded calm in the small room with its stacked proofs and tied bundles. He counted coins onto the desk, then added 2 more. "For the rise," he said. She took the money and slipped it into her purse. As she did, her glove caught on a rough edge of the desk. The seam gave way. Ink marked the tips of her fingers, dark and deep in the lines of her skin. Harrow saw and said nothing. He only nodded toward the door. Eleanor stepped back into the fog. She pulled her glove tight, though the stain had already bled through. The coins weighed more than they should have. She walked home with her head high, as if from a visit paid at a proper hour, and did not look down at her hands. Chapter 2. The crusade begins. The newsroom of the London Standard never truly fell silent. Even before the sun had burned through the grey sky, The long room held the steady scratch of pens, the clack of type, and the low murmur of men shaping the day into print. Ink hung in the air with the dry scent of paper dust. Stacks of folded sheets leaned in uneven towers along the walls. A boy hurried past with a tray of proofs, nearly colliding with a chair leg, earning a sharp word from the foreman. At the far desk, near the tall windows, sat Thomas Ashford, coat neat, collar stiff. His dark hair kept close and orderly as the lines of type before him. A pile of letters lay at his elbow, tied with string that had already been cut. He lifted one, unfolded it with care, and began to read. His face did not change much as his eyes moved, but his jaw set firm. He marked the margin with a small, precise stroke of his pen. The next letter told of a boy who had slipped coins from his mother's purse, then claimed he meant to buy the latest number of a lurid serial. The third spoke of girls whispering about masked men and night crimes, their heads full of scenes they ought never picture. Ashford laid each page flat, smoothing the crease with his palm, as if order might pass from paper to life. Across from him, Mr. Colby leaned back in his chair, spectacles low on his nose. "More of the same?" he asked. "More," Ashford said. The tone grows sharper. Colby gave a short laugh. "Folk enjoy a fright, always have." Ashford did not smile. Folk also copy what they admire. Words shape conduct. He set aside the letters in a neat stack and pulled a fresh sheet toward him. The nib of his pen dipped, rose, and began its path. He wrote in steady lines, each sentence built like a wall laid brick by brick. He did not hurry, though the room around him moved with rush and noise. His article opened with calm language, measured and clear. He spoke of duty, of the press as steward of the public mind, of the harm done when tales of blood and trickery were sold as pastime. He named no single title, yet every man in the room knew the kind he meant. A printer's runner approached with a proof. "Sir, the column on the rail dispute." "Later," Ashford said without lifting his gaze. "This must lead—" The runner nodded and moved on. Ashford paused only to flex his fingers, then wrote again. He described the rise in cheap cereals, their bold covers, their promise of shock. He called it a trade in nerves, a habit that fed on fear. He wrote that a nation fed on such fare would grow restless, quick to thrill, slow to think. His pen did not blot. His script stayed even. When he finished, he blew soft on the page and set it aside to dry. He reached for the letters once more, reading the names at the bottom. Mothers, schoolmasters, a vicar from the north. He gathered them into a packet and tied the string again. Evidence laid in order. He looked across the room at the long tables, the inked hands, the boys with quick feet, and felt a firm line within himself, a path he meant to keep. Colby leaned over, scanning the first lines of the piece. "Strong words," he said. "They must be," Ashford replied. He capped his ink and rose, taking the pages to the editor's desk. As he walked back, he paused by the window. On the street below, a vendor waved a bright pamphlet, its cover marked with a bold drawing of a masked figure and a woman in peril. A small crowd had formed, coins already out. Ashford watched the exchange, then turned away. "Find me the source," he said to Colby as he returned to his seat. The chief hand behind these tales. No work spreads so wide without a steady pen at its heart. Colby shrugged. "They hide well. So do most things that prefer the dark," Ashford said. He drew a fresh sheet toward him, his resolve set as firm as the press that would carry his words across the city by dawn. Chapter 3. Gaslight Introductions. Lady Penbury's drawing room glowed as if the night outside had been kept firmly at bay. Lamps stood along the walls, their glass chimneys clear, their flames steady. The light caught on gilt frames, on polished wood, on the pale silk of gowns. A small fire burned bright in the grate, more for cheer than heat. Chairs had been drawn into a loose circle, though no one sat for long. People drifted in pairs and trios, voices rising and falling like soft music. A violin rested on a side table, waiting its turn. Eleanor stood near the mantel, a cup in her hand, her pale dress simple beside richer cloth. She had chosen gloves without men's showing, though the tips still felt faintly stiff where ink had once marked her skin. Lady Penbury, draped in velvet the shade of dark plums, moved through the room like a host at sea, guiding talk from one cluster to another. "We must have a subject," she declared, clapping her hands once. "Something to wake us? Books," said a young barrister with bright eyes. "Everyone quarrels over books just now." A murmur of approval moved through the group. Lady Penbury smiled. "Very well. Are stories a gift or a danger?" She turned with clear intent toward a tall man near the window. Mr. Ashford, you work among print. You begin. Thomas Ashford inclined his head. His coat was dark, his manner neat, his gaze direct. Stories guide the mind, he said. They set patterns. When tales dwell on crime and trickery, they train the eye to admire what should be shunned. His tone was calm, not loud, yet the circle tightened around him. And when tales show hardship, Eleanor asked before she could stop herself. Several heads turned. She felt the warmth rise in her face, but did not step back. When they show the press of need, the narrow path some must walk, do they not let others see lives beyond their own? Ashford looked at her with interest, not annoyance. They may, he said, but the line is thin. Pity can slide into thrill. A scene meant to stir care can stir desire instead. Eleanor held his gaze. Is the fault in the tale, or in the eye that takes it? A few listeners smiled at that. Lady Penbury leaned closer. Pleased. Ashford answered at once. Both share the burden. The maker of a story knows the power of shape and scene. He must use that power with care. Or she, Eleanor said, a small edge in her voice. Or she, he agreed without pause. The pen does not escape duty. Duty to what? Asked the barrister. To the good of those who take the words in, Ashford said. Eleanor set her cup aside. And if the good lies in truth, even when truth is hard. There are people who live close to fear, to want. If stories never touch that ground, we leave them unseen. Ashford studied her, his eyes thoughtful. To show want is not wrong. To dress it as spectacle is... A brief silence fell, not cold, but tight with thought. The violin began in the corner, a soft air that filled the space between them. Lady Penbury clapped again, delighted. Excellent. We are awake now. Talk broke into smaller streams. Someone asked Eleanor about a poem she had mentioned. She answered, yet her mind stayed with the man by the window. A few minutes later he approached, careful, as if crossing a narrow bridge. You speak with care, he said. May I ask your name? Eleanor Whitcomb. Thomas Ashford. He bowed slightly. I hope our views may cross again. So do I, she said, though her chest felt tight. His certainty had weight, like a stone placed on a table. As he took his leave later, offering thanks to Lady Penbury, Eleanor watched him go. The lamps burned steady, the room warm and bright, yet a small chill lingered with her, as if a draught had found its way in through some unseen crack. Chapter 4. Ink After Midnight. The house had gone still by the time Eleanor set the small lamp near her desk and drew the curtain tight. The flame hummed low, its glow held close by the shade, so no stray light would reach the street. Paper lay stacked in a neat pile to her right, the top sheet blank and waiting. She flexed her fingers once, then lowered the pen. Ink met paper with a soft scratch. In her story, a man ran along a river path, boots sliding on wet stones, breath sharp in his chest as a shout rose behind him. She gave him a narrow alley to turn into, a gate left unlatched, a chance that might close at any moment. Her lines moved fast, her pen pressing hard enough to leave a faint mark beneath each stroke. A soft knock came at her door. She froze, pen lifted. Yes? Henry slipped in, hat in hand, though he was indoors, as if he had not thought to remove it. His face looked pale, the skin beneath his eyes dark. You are awake, he said, then saw the desk and the pages. He tried to smile. I will be brief. Eleanor set the pen aside and turned in her chair. What has happened? Nothing that cannot be put right, he said at once, then faltered. He moved closer, lowering his voice though the house slept. I owe more than I said. I had thought to win it back. It went ill. He looked at the floor. They are not patient men. Her hand tightened on the arm of the chair. How much? He named a sum that made the room feel small. The lamp's glow seemed to press in. They will come by the end of the week, he said. I asked for time. She nodded once. You shall have it. Henry looked up. Hope and shame mixed in his face. I do not know how you manage, he said. Go to bed, she answered. We will speak in the morning. He left with steps that tried to be light and were not. Eleanor turned back to the page. In her story, the man in the alley found the gate barred after all. She had not planned it, but her pen wrote it so. He climbed, hands slipping, coat tearing on a nail. Behind him, the pursuer's steps rang closer. She added a flash of steel in a hand, a threat made plain. The scene grew sharper, louder. She paused only to blot the page and start the next. Near 2 o'clock, a tap sounded below at the front door, 3 quick knocks in a pattern she knew. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and went down, careful on the stairs. Felix Harrow stood in the entry, hat low, coat damp at the hem. "Forgive the hour," he said, stepping inside. "Sales have risen again. The public cannot wait." "I will bring the pages tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow is late," he replied, though his tone stayed smooth. "We must keep the pace. A strong turn, a narrow escape, something to set tongues wagging." His eyes flicked toward the desk she had left upstairs. "You have the touch. Lean into it." She felt a small pull of dislike at the phrase, but she nodded. "You shall have what you need." He smiled, satisfied, and took his leave. Back at her desk, Eleanor dipped the pen again. In the story, the man reached the top of the gate and dropped to the far side, landing hard. She gave him a twist of luck, a cart passing at the right moment, a cloth to hide his face. She wrote a cry from the one left behind, anger bright as a flare. The scene ran hot and fast. She did not slow to smooth it, did not search for gentler turns. Her lines grew bold, the moments tight and close. When at last she set the pen down, her wrist ached and the lamp oil ran low. She gathered the sheets and stacked them, tapping the edge on the desk to square them. A small smear marked the side of her hand where ink had found skin. She wiped it with a cloth, but a shadow remained. She looked at the pages, at the swift path she had cut through the night, and then at the closed door, beyond which her brother slept in uneasy peace. She blew out the lamp and sat a moment in the dark, listening to the quiet house and the faint echo of footsteps that were only in her mind. Chapter 5. A Question of Influence. The schoolroom smelled of chalk and damp wool. Boys sat at long desks, caps tucked away, boots lined beneath the bench. A map of the world hung crooked on the wall, its corners curled. Thomas Ashford stood near the master's desk, hat in hand, listening as the master spoke in a low voice meant not to carry. "They passed the book between them," the man said. "Hidden in a grammar text. Tales of night crimes." The boys whispered lines at play. Ashford nodded, his face still. "And you believe the stories, stir them to mischief." "I see the change," the master replied. "They act bold in the wrong ways. Quick to laugh at things that should give pause." Ashford made a small note in his book, the pencil sharp, the script neat. He thanked the master and moved on. At a charitable home near the river, a matron told him of girls who stayed up past lights out, trading thin pamphlets with bright covers. "They speak of masked men as if they were heroes," she said, lips pressed tight. Ashford wrote again, careful to mark names and dates. Each account he set in order, a line added to a growing case. By noon he stood outside, the wind off the water cool on his face. Carts rolled by, wheels loud on the stones. A newsboy waved a fresh number of a serial, voice high and eager. Ashford watched coins change hands, then turned away and walked toward the square, where Lady Penbury often held small gatherings. On clear days, Eleanor stood beneath the plane tree, speaking with a woman about a concert to be held next week. The light through the leaves made soft shapes on her dress. When she saw Ashford approach, she offered a polite smile. "Mr. Ashford, Miss Whitcomb." He bowed slightly. "May I trouble you for a moment?" "Of course." They stepped aside, the hum of talk around them like a low tide. "I have been about the city," he said. "Schools, homes, places where young minds are formed. I hear the same concern. Stories that dwell on crime seem to make crime seem small." Eleanor folded her hands. "You gather many voices." "I try," he said. "You have a clear way of weighing matters. I value your view." She felt the words like a small weight set in her palm. "What do you wish to know?" "Whether you think a tale can harm by the way it paints a scene," he said. "Not by intent, but by effect." She chose her reply with care. "Any strong image can linger," she said. "But so can kindness or courage. It depends what stays with the reader when the page is done." Ashford nodded, pleased by the measured tone. "Just so. That is why the maker must think of the end, not only the moment." He paused, then added, "I have begun to trace the chief hand behind these serials. There is a pattern in the turns of phrase, a way of building a scene. I believe it comes from one steady pen. Eleanor kept her gaze steady on his face. And you mean to find this person? I do, he said, not to shame, but to speak plainly. If a man has such reach, he must know the weight of it. Or a woman, she said lightly. Or a woman, he agreed with a brief smile. Though the trade is harsh, few ladies would choose it. She felt a faint heat rise to her cheeks and hoped the shade hid it. People choose what they must, she said. Ashford studied her for a moment, as if the line pleased him. That is true in many things. A bell rang from the church across the square. He stepped back. Thank you for your time, Miss Whitcomb. Your sense is steady. I am glad of it. He took his leave, striding toward the street with purpose. Eleanor watched him go, the sound of the newsboy's call drifting again on the air. She clasped her hands tighter as if to keep them still, and felt the faint roughness at her fingertips where ink had worked into the skin. Chapter 6. Paper Masks. Lady Penbury's salon that night carried a softer mood than the last. The lamps were turned lower, the curtains drawn close, and the air held the warm scent of beeswax and spiced wine. Chairs had been set in rows near the piano, and a young woman in pale blue sat poised on the bench, hands ready above the keys. People spoke in gentler tones, as if the music had already begun. Eleanor arrived with her mother, who wore her best brooch and held herself as if the house they had left behind was rich and bright. Eleanor smiled when spoken to, answered with care, and kept her wrists turned so the cuff of her glove hid the faint mark beneath. The music began with a light piece, quick and clean. Notes rose like small birds, then settled again. Lady Penbury drifted between guests, eyes bright with pleasure. Thomas Ashford stood near a bookcase, watching the room with the calm focus he carried even here. When Eleanor's gaze met his, he crossed the space with ease. "Miss Whitcomb," he said. "Good evening." "Good evening," she replied. "You seem less ready to quarrel tonight," he said, and the hint of humor in his voice surprised her. "Perhaps I have used my sharpness up," she answered. "Or perhaps the music has made peace," he said. Eleanor felt a laugh gather in her chest. Small at first, then real. It escaped before she could catch it. It was not loud, but it was free, and it startled her as much as it did him. Ashford's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "There," he said. "That is a rare sound." "I do laugh," she said, trying to regain composure. "I do not doubt it," he replied, "but I have not heard it." They moved toward a side table where small plates had been laid out. Mrs. Whitcomb was drawn into talk with a pair of older ladies, leaving Eleanor a short stretch of ease. A man nearby began telling a long tale about a country house and a missing ring, his voice dramatic, his pauses too heavy. Lady Penbury waved him on with exaggerated interest. When he finished, the circle gave polite praise and drifted apart. Ashford glanced toward Eleanor. "You look as if you could tell it better." She lifted her brows. "I would not dare challenge his ring." "Not the ring," Ashford said. "The telling. You watched the room while he spoke. You knew where he lost them." Eleanor hesitated, then said, "He began well, but he stayed in one place too long. A tale must move." "Show me," Ashford said. "Take the same idea and make it live." She should have refused. She knew it. Yet the room felt warm, and the music in the background made a small curtain between her and her fear. "Very well," she said, and lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. "A ring is not lost in a house by accident. It is lost because someone wants it found by the wrong person." Ashford's attention sharpened at once. "Go on." Eleanor smiled despite herself. "So you begin with a servant who knows too much and says too little." He keeps glancing at the stair, not at the floor. "Then you place a guest at the right moment, someone who should not be there. The ring is found beneath a vase, but the vase was moved that morning. No one admits it. The mistress grows pale because she recalls the letter she burned too late." Ashford gave a low chuckle. "You have made the room feel close, and then," Eleanor said, feeling the rhythm of it, "you do not solve it at once. You let the wrong man take the blame. You let the true hand hide behind good manners. That is the trick. The mask is not on the face. It is in the polite smile." She stopped, breath caught, aware she had spoken too freely. Yet Ashford only looked at her with quiet admiration. "You see scenes," he said, "as if you stand within them." "It is only fancy," she replied quickly. "It is more than that," he said. A hush fell as the pianist began another piece, slower, rich with longing. The room shifted, bodies turning toward the sound. Eleanor felt the heat in her face again and lifted her hand to adjust her glove. The cuff slid back a fraction. A dark mark showed at the edge of her wrist, a stubborn shadow of ink that had not fully left. She tugged the fabric down at once. Ashford's gaze flicked to the motion, then back to her face. He did not speak of it. He only said, "You carry a great deal behind a calm front, Miss Whitcomb." Eleanor held his eyes, her smile smaller now. "Do we not all—" "For some the mask fits too well," he said, his tone gentle. The words made her chest tighten. She turned slightly toward the music, as if it could shield her. Yet she felt him beside her, close enough that she could sense his warmth without him touching her. The piano's notes rolled through the room, and for a few minutes she let herself listen, letting the sound fill the space where her secrets pressed. When the piece ended, the room breathed again, and Ashford spoke softly. "May I call on you next week?" Eleanor's heart moved hard against her ribs. "If it pleases my mother," she said. "It pleases me," he answered, and the simple truth of it left her unsteady. She kept her hands folded, cuffs in place, and wore her polite smile like a shield, even as she felt it beginning to crack. Chapter 7. The Printer's Trail. The print shop on Fleet Street ran like a machine that never slept. Even in the morning light the windows were filled with soot, and the air inside carried heat and damp. Men moved between presses with arms bare to the elbow, hands black with ink, faces shiny with sweat. Sheets hung on lines to dry, rows of white pages that fluttered when a door opened. Thomas Ashford stepped in with care, his boots avoiding puddles, his coat buttoned tight as if the grime might stain through cloth by will alone. A foreman met him near the door, wiping his hands on a rag that only spread the ink. "Mr. Ashford," the man said, respectful but guarded. "We were told you might come." "I only seek clarity," Ashford replied. He held his notebook ready. "I want the names behind certain runs. Cheap cereals, sold in parts. I am told your shop has printed some—" The foreman's mouth tightened. "We print what we are paid to print. And you keep records," Ashford said. "I do not ask you to judge the work. I ask you to show me the line it follows from pen to street." The foreman led him past a press, where a boy fed paper too fast, and earned a shout. They stopped at a desk with a ledger thick enough to bruise a hand. Pages were turned. Numbers, dates, titles, quantities. Ashford's eyes moved across the columns with quick, trained focus. He asked questions in a calm tone, never raising his voice, never letting his interest look like hunger. He noted the names of distributors, the routes, the shops that took the most copies. He did not say Penny Dreadful aloud. He did not have to. After 2 more shops, the pattern held. Different printers, different foremen, but the same threads appeared again and again. A certain distributor's name returned like a mark that would not wash away. A certain style of paper, a certain size of run. By midday, Ashford stood on the street with his notebook full and the fog of ink still clinging to his coat. He could feel the trail narrowing. He walked to a small coffee room and took a table near the back. From there he wrote a list on a clean sheet, then crossed out 2 names and circled one. Felix Harrow. Harrow's press did not print everything, but it touched enough. It sat at the center of the flow like a pump. Ashford stared at the name for a long moment, then folded the sheet and slipped it into his pocket. Across the city, Eleanor sat in her mother's parlor, with a letter open on her lap, its seal broken with a careful hand. The letter was not from a friend. It held no perfume, no pleasant gossip. It was a plain note with plain words, and a date at the bottom that looked like a blade. Henry stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed on the street, as if he could will the world to move past the house without seeing it. "I told them I would have it," Henry said, voice tight. They laughed. Eleanor did not look up. "They gave you 2 days," she said. He nodded once. "They said, if I do not pay, they will come to father's old contacts. They will not mind speaking loudly." Mrs. Whitcomb entered with a tray, then saw their faces and set it down too fast. The cups rattled. "What is this?" she demanded. "Nothing you must fret over," Henry said too quickly. Eleanor folded the letter and slid it beneath a cushion. "A small matter," she said, forcing her voice steady. "It will be settled." Mrs. Whitcomb stared at her son, then at Eleanor, and chose denial as if it were a prayer. Very well, she said. We shall not discuss it. There is a call to be paid tomorrow. Lady Penbury is fond of punctuality. She left chin high, as if the world obeyed manners. That night, Eleanor went out again. The fog was thinner, but the street lamps still wore halos. She reached Harrow's office and found him waiting with the door cracked, as if he had been watching the lane. He let her in at once and bolted the door behind her. You came quickly, he said, and his easy tone did not quite hide a strain. I had to, Eleanor replied. I brought the pages. He took the packet, but did not open it. His eyes stayed on her face. We have a problem, he said. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. What sort? The sort that wears a clean coat and asks tidy questions, Harrow said. A man has been in 3 shops, asking after runs and routes. Not some clerk, not a gossip. Someone with reach. Who? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the kind of man he meant. Harrow hesitated a beat. Ashford, he said, from the London Standard. The name struck her like cold water. She kept her face still, but her fingers pressed hard into the strap of her purse. Why would he come to you? She asked. He is tracing the work, Harrow replied. He wants the writer. He thinks the writer is a danger. He tapped the packet on the desk once. A small, sharp sound. And your name is safe, only so long as you do not slip. Eleanor's throat felt dry. She thought of Ashford's steady gaze, the way he had asked for her opinion as if it mattered, the way he had watched her hands. What do you suggest? She said. Harrow spread his palms. If you stop, the serial dies. The public will howl, but that is not my first concern. My first concern is that if you stop, you might still be found. A trail does not vanish at once. And if I continue, she asked. He leaned closer. Then you keep control. You keep the rhythm. You keep the work moving, so no one looks too hard at what came before. Eleanor stared at the packet of pages. Her mind ran in 2 directions at once. Stop and breathe. Stop and be safe. Continue and pay. Continue and save Henry. She saw again the letter with the date like a blade. She saw her mother's lifted chin, her refusal to see. I cannot stop, Eleanor said at last, and the words hurt her mouth. Harrow nodded, not kind, not cruel, simply sure. Then you must be careful, he said. No slips at salons, no talk that sounds like your pages. No ink where it should not be. Eleanor pulled her cuffs down a fraction, as if that could hide everything. He will call on us, she said, more to herself than to Harrow. He already has, Harrow replied. Men like him enjoy the hunt. They also enjoy the feeling that they are saving someone. Eleanor's breath caught. She took the coins he offered, without counting them. The money felt like both rescue and chain. When she stepped back into the street, the fog seemed thicker again, though she knew it had not changed. She walked home with her hood up, heart beating hard, and the sense that the city itself had turned its face toward her, watching. Chapter 8. Words they cannot say. Rain struck the carriage roof in a steady rush, a soft drum that filled the small space with sound. The street beyond the glass blurred into streaks of gold and grey as the lamp slid past. Eleanor sat on the narrow seat with her hands folded tight in her lap, the damp edge of her cloak tucked beneath her skirts so it would not brush against him. Thomas Ashford sat opposite, though the carriage was small enough that the space between them felt slight. The air held the scent of wet wool and leather. Neither spoke at first. Lady Penbury's servant had insisted they share the ride for a short distance, as the downpour had come on at once and the street had emptied fast. It was proper enough, with the driver in place and the door closed firm. Still, Eleanor felt each turn of the wheels as if it marked time in some other way. I am glad you did not attempt to walk, Ashford said at last. His voice was calm, almost lost beneath the rain. The stones would be slick. I thank you, she replied. I had not expected such a storm. Few things give warning, he said. He glanced toward the window, where a sheet of water ran down the glass. One must prepare as best one can. Eleanor nodded, though she was not sure which part of her life he meant. The carriage lurched, then settled. A wheel struck a rut, and the jolt brought them closer for a brief second. Her sleeve brushed his coat. She drew back at once, heat rising to her face. He shifted too, careful, as if the small touch had weight. You spoke with spirit tonight, he said. About stories, did I? She asked, though she knew she had. You did, he said. You see more than most. That is why I value your view. He paused, then added, I hold that those who shape words carry a duty beyond themselves. To whom? She asked softly. To the many, he said. To the young who take in more than they know. To those who do not have the tools to sort sense from thrill. His gaze met hers in the dim light. If we do not guard the gate, we let harm pass. Eleanor looked down at her hands. The glove on her right felt tight at the cuff where she had drawn it low. There are other gates, she said. Some stand before a house, some before a heart. He listened without interrupting. A person may have duties close at hand, she went on. To those under their roof. To keep them safe, to keep them from shame or want. That gate can press hard too. Ashford's expression softened. I do not doubt it, he said. Family binds us first. And sometimes, she said, choosing each word with care, the path that serves one duty may look ill from another side. He held her gaze. Then the choice must be made with care, he said. One must ask which duty runs deeper. The rain grew louder for a moment, then eased. A lantern passed close to the window, lighting his face in brief gold before shadow returned. Eleanor felt the closeness again, not of space but of thought. They spoke around a shape neither named, circling it with care. Do you ever fear you are too certain? She asked, almost before she knew she would. He smiled faintly. Often. Certainty is a tool. It must be set down at times. He looked at his hands, then back at her. But if we hold nothing firm, we drift. The carriage slowed. The driver called out a street name. Eleanor's stop came first. She gathered her cloak, careful not to let it brush his sleeve again. When the carriage halted, he rose and opened the door, standing aside to give her space. The rain had softened to a mist. Good night, Miss Wickham, he said. Good night, Mr. Ashford. She stepped down, her shoes touching wet stone. For a moment she looked back. He stood within the carriage frame, lamplight behind him, his face thoughtful. The door closed. The wheels turned. The carriage moved on, and she stood a moment longer in the damp air, her heart full of words she had not spoken, and of the quiet weight of those she had. Chapter 9. Deadlines and Debts. The knock came at mid-morning, sharp and sure, not like a neighbour and not like a friend. Eleanor was in the front parlour with her mother, mending a small tear in a sleeve so fine it felt like cobweb between her fingers. Mrs. Whitcomb spoke of a luncheon to be held next week, naming guests as if names were food and could fill a hungry house. When the knock sounded again louder, the needle slipped and pricked Eleanor's thumb. A bead of blood rose bright. She pressed it to the cloth at once and hid the mark with her hand. The maid opened the door. 2 men stood in the entry, hats low, coats dark, rain still drying at the hems though the day was clear. One held a folded paper. The other kept his hands in his pockets, as if he did not need to show them. We are here for Mr. Henry Whitcomb, the first said. His voice was polite in the way a blade can be polished. We have business. Mrs. Whitcomb rose. My son is not at home, she said, tone stiff. If you have a message, you may leave it. It would be best if we spoke with him, the man replied. He smiled without warmth. He knows why. Eleanor stood too, her heart beating hard. He is out, she said. You may return later. The second man shifted his weight and glanced past them into the hall, as if taking stock of what the house held. Later is not our habit, he said. We keep to time. The first man lifted the paper. 2 days, he said. That is what was agreed. We are here to remind him. If we do not see him by nightfall, we will seek him elsewhere. In places where the talk carries. Mrs. Whitcomb's face tightened, but her eyes stayed proud. You will not threaten us in our own home, she said. We are not men of threats, the first replied. We are men of accounts. He tipped his hat with a mock grace and stepped back. The second followed. The door closed. For a moment, the house held a hush, like a held breath. Then Mrs. Whitcomb turned on Eleanor. What was that? She demanded. What have you both done? Nothing you must carry, Eleanor said quickly. Henry will settle it. Mrs. Whitcomb pressed a hand to her chest, as if the air had turned thin. Settle it, she repeated. and the word sounded like a charm she wished to believe. She straightened. "We shall not speak of this again," she said, voice sharp with fear dressed as pride. "Do you hear me? Not a word. If the neighbors suspect—" She did not finish. She returned to her chair and picked up her embroidery as if it could stitch the morning back into order. Henry arrived at dusk, face tight, jaw clenched. He had been to the clubs, he said, asking for help. None had come. They were at the house, he said, eyes darting to the front window, as if he expected the men to step from behind the curtain. They will come again. Eleanor went to her room and opened the small wooden box beneath her bed. Inside lay the last fine thing she owned outright, a brooch of gold with a small pearl at its center. It had belonged to her grandmother. As a child she had been allowed to hold it once, warned not to drop it, told it would one day be hers. It lay now in her palm, cool and heavy, catching the lamplight like a quiet eye. She stared at it until her vision blurred, then closed the box and carried the brooch downstairs. "I can sell it," she said. Henry's eyes widened. "No," he said at once. "Eleanor, no. It is a thing," she replied. "You are my brother?" Mrs. Whitcomb looked up, startled. "That brooch is not to leave this family," she said, voice shaking. It is not bread," Eleanor said, and surprised herself with the hardness of her tone. She softened it at once. "Mama, we need time. Only time." Mrs. Whitcomb's lips pressed tight. She looked away, as if she did not see it would not happen. Eleanor wrapped the brooch in cloth and went out alone. The pawn shop was not far, but it might as well have been a mile. Men leaned in doorways, watching passers-by. A dog nosed through rubbish near a gutter. The pawnshop window held tarnished candlesticks and cracked frames, a row of small lives turned into objects. Inside, the owner took the brooch and turned it between his fingers, eyes narrowed. He named a sum that felt like an insult. Eleanor did not argue. She only nodded and took the coins. When she returned, Henry looked at the money as if it burned. "It will buy us a few days," Eleanor said. "Only that." "A few days," Henry echoed, voice rough. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I will fix this. I swear it." Eleanor did not answer. She went upstairs to her desk. The lamp was already set, the shade pulled low. The blank page waited like a cold stare. She sat, picked up her pen, and began. In the serial, the hunted man hid in a cellar beneath a tavern. Above him, boots paced, voices low and cruel. She wrote the sound of a latch being tried. She wrote the damp air, the dirt under nails, the sting in the lungs. Her pen moved fast, faster than it should. She did not pause to shape a phrase or smooth a line. She fed the scene forward as if the words were steps and the only safety lay in not stopping. A knock came at her door. She did not answer. Another knock. Still she did not lift her head. The pen kept scratching, the ink flowing in dark turns. In her story, the man found a loose brick, pulled it free, discovered a narrow passage. She made the passage tight, sharp with stone, his shoulders scraping as he crawled. She made his breath loud in his own ears. She made the danger close enough to feel. Somewhere below, Henry's voice rose, then fell, and the sound of her mother's reply followed, thin and strained. Eleanor did not move. The room around her faded to the circle of lamplight and the white page. The rest became noise at a distance, like rain on a roof. Her hand began to ache, but she did not stop. She wrote the moment of escape, the sudden burst into an alley, the chase renewed. She added a twist she would once have refused, a scream, a blow, a fall. The scene grew harsher, louder, more hungry. When she at last paused, her fingers were cramped. Ink had seeped through a small split in her glove and marked her skin again. She stared at the stain as if it belonged to someone else. The pages on her desk looked like a stack of debts, each line a coin she must earn. She tied the bundle with twine, hands shaking, and set it beside the lamp. In the quiet after, she heard the house, heard it as if from far away. A chair creaked. A door closed. A cough. Her own breath. She pressed her forehead to the cool edge of the desk for one slow moment. Then she sat up, reached for fresh paper, and began the next part, because the night was not done with her yet. Chapter 10. The Proof Sheet. The print shop on Drury Lane was narrower than the others Ashford had visited, the ceiling low enough that a tall man might brush it with his hat. The air held the sour warmth of ink and damp paper. A press thudded at the back, slow and steady, like a heart that would not tire. Thomas Ashford stood beside a high table where a clerk sorted fresh sheets into neat piles. The clerk glanced at him once, then again, measuring the cut of his coat and the quiet firmness of his manner. "I was told you might have a set of proofs," Ashford said. "From a serial now in part." The clerk wiped his fingers on a rag and nodded toward a side shelf. "Left to dry," he said. "Not yet trimmed." Ashford moved closer. The sheets lay in a stack, the ink still rich and dark, the margins wide. He lifted the top page with care. The title stood bold at the head, followed by lines of type print. He began to read. A man pressed into a narrow passage, stone close on either side, air thin, heart loud. Ashford's brow drew in. He turned the page. A chase through a yard hemmed by walls, a door barred, a window too small. He read on, each scene closing in, each image of space made tight and breath scarce. "Strong stuff," the clerk said, watching him. Ashford did not answer. His eyes moved faster. A phrase caught him, a line about the mask worn not on the face but in the smile. He had heard those words, not in print, but in a warm room with music and lamps, spoken in a light tone that hid a keen mind. He lowered the page a fraction, then raised it again, as if the letters might shift if he looked away. "May I take a copy?" he asked. "Not meant to leave," the clerk said. Ashford took out a card and set it on the table. The clerk read the name, glanced at the press, then back at the card. After a moment, he slid one proof aside. "Return it," he said. Ashford folded the sheets once, careful not to crease the print, and slipped them into his case. Outside, the day felt too bright. Carts rolled past, wheels loud. A woman called out the price of apples. Ashford walked without seeing, the pages await against his side. He reached the small park near the Strand and took a bench beneath a bare tree. He drew out the proofs and read again, slower now. A man hid in a cellar while boots paced above. A loose brick, a narrow crawl, a scrape of cloth on stone. The images pressed close, not only in the tale but in his mind. He saw again Eleanor Whitcomb beneath the lamps, her hands folded, her voice calm as she spoke of gates and masks, of duty that pulls in more than one direction. He shut the pages for a moment and stared at the gravel path. Children ran past, a nurse calling after them. A dog barked. The world felt wide and open, yet the scenes he had read made it seem small. He opened the proofs again, turning to a passage he had marked with his thumb. The line about the mask, the same turn of thought, the same quiet sharpness. "It is a common image," he murmured to himself. "Anyone might use it, yet the words did not sit well." He remembered the way she had watched a tale being told, and seen where it failed, how she had shaped a better one in a breath. He remembered the faint dark mark at her cuff, the quick motion to hide it. He had thought nothing of it then, or rather, he had chosen not to think. A man took the other end of the bench and began to eat his lunch, paper crackling. Ashford rose at once, unable to sit. He walked the path with the proofs in his hand, the paper soft at the folds now. His mind ran in two lines at once. One held his work, his belief that words must be used with care, that the press should guard the young. The other held a face, a voice, a laugh he had heard only once and wished to hear again. He stopped near the gate and read the final lines of the part. The hunted man broke free for the moment, only to see a shadow fall across the alley mouth. The end hung there, a hook set deep. Ashford felt the pull of it, the craft of it, the skill in the turn. He could not deny it. He folded the sheets and slid them back into his case. The park seemed smaller now, the sky lower. He told himself he had no proof, only a passing likeness, a shared image that might mean nothing. He told himself he would look elsewhere, test other lines, follow other threads. Yet as he walked toward the street, one thought would not leave him. The trail he had followed through shops and ledgers might not end in some dark office with a lone man at a desk. It might end in a bright room with lamps and music, where a young woman spoke of stories with calm eyes and careful words. Chapter 11. A Dangerous Tenderness. Thomas Ashford stood in the Whitcomb parlour with his hat held before him and his coat brushed free of street dust, as if neat cloth could prove neat intent. Mrs. Whitcomb sat upright on the sofa, her back straight, her smile thin but pleased. Eleanor stood by the window, hands clasped, the light at her shoulder turning her profile pale. "I hope I do not intrude," Ashford said. "Not at all," Mrs. Whitcomb replied. "We are honoured." Ashford inclined his head. "I wish to call properly. I have enjoyed Miss Whitcomb's company at Lady Pembury's gatherings. I hope she may allow me to continue the acquaintance under your eye." Mrs. Whitcomb's smile warmed at once. "A very proper request," she said. "My daughter keeps few callers, but those she does keep are of the best sort." Eleanor felt heat rise to her face. She met Ashford's gaze for a brief moment, then lowered her eyes. "I am glad of the visit," she said quietly. Tea was brought. Cups were set. The talk moved along safe lines at first: the weather, a lecture to be held next week, the state of the roads. Yet beneath the words ran a current that made each pause feel full. Ashford spoke with care, asking Eleanor about her reading, her thoughts on a new poem in circulation. He listened to her replies as if they mattered, not as a form to be endured. When at last he rose to leave, he bowed to Mrs. Whitcomb and turned to Eleanor. "May I call again?" he asked. "If it pleases Mamma," she said, though her heart beat so hard she feared the sound might carry. "It pleases me," Mrs. Whitcomb said at once. After he left, Mrs. Whitcomb pressed Eleanor's hands in both of hers. "A fine man," she said, "steady, respected. You must not frighten him with your quiet ways." Eleanor smiled, though a small ache sat beneath the joy. She thought of ink, of pages tied with twine, of a name that was not hers printed in bold at the head of each part. Across town, Ashford sat at the long table in the newsroom, a draft before him. The noise of the presses thudded through the floor. Mr. Colby leaned over his shoulder. "You have softened," Colby said, tapping a line with his finger. "Where is the fire?" Ashford kept his gaze on the page. "Heat without light does little good," he said. "We must speak to the makers of stories, not only about them." Colby snorted. "You were ready to drag them into the sun last week." "I still hold that tales carry weight," Ashford said. "But I have seen that the hand behind them may have reasons we do not know." "Reasons," Colby echoed. "For filling boys' heads with daggers." Ashford did not rise to the jab. "We deal in words," he said. "We ought to use them with care." Colby shook his head and walked off, muttering. Ashford looked down at the draft again. He crossed out a phrase that had once felt right and wrote another in its place, gentler in tone though no less firm. He could not have said why his hand had changed, only that it had. That evening he walked to Lady Penbury's once more. Eleanor was there, standing near the hearth, her mother in close talk with a neighbour. When she saw him, her smile came quick and bright, then faded to something softer, unsure. "You have been busy," she said. "As have you," he replied, though he did not know in what way the words might be true. "I called today with your mother's leave," she told me, Eleanor said. Her voice held a note he had not heard before, something like hope edged with fear. They spoke of small things at first, yet their talk slipped often into pauses where neither wished to look away. Eleanor felt a lightness she had not known in months, a sense that some part of her life might be simple after all. At the same time, dread moved beneath it, quiet and steady, like a current under calm water. Each kind word from him felt like a step toward a door she could not open without letting the dark rush in. When the evening ended, Ashford walked beside her and Mrs. Whitcomb to the door. The air outside held the first chill of autumn. "I look forward to our next meeting," he said. "As do I," Eleanor replied, and meant it. Yet as she watched him walk away beneath the street lamps, she pressed her gloved hands together, feeling the faint roughness beneath the cloth, and wondered how long joy and fear could share the same small space within her. Chapter 12. Discovery. The afternoon light lay pale across Lady Penbury's drawing room, thin as watered milk. Only a few guests had come, and the talk was soft, shaped more by habit than by heat. A small fire burned low in the grate, more for show than warmth. Eleanor sat near the window with a piece of needlework in her lap, though her hands had not moved in some time. Thomas Ashford stood across the room, speaking with Lady Penbury about a charity lecture to be held next month. "The hall may not hold all who wish to come," Lady Penbury was saying. "Interest has grown of late." "Interest often grows around what stirs the nerves," Ashford replied, polite but firm. Eleanor looked up at that, the words catching her ear. A young man nearby began recounting a recent theft, full of flourishes, each detail larger than the last. His voice rose with excitement. "And the thief slipped away in plain sight," he cried. "Right past them all." Eleanor smiled faintly, then shook her head. "The mask is never on the face," she said without thinking. "It is in the smile that no one questions." The words fell into the room like a dropped cup. Not loud, but sharp enough to turn heads. Ashford's gaze moved to her at once. For a moment neither spoke. The young man laughed, thinking it wit, and went on with his tale. Talk resumed in small waves, but something had shifted. Eleanor felt the change a beat too late. The phrase echoed back to her from memory, not from the room, but from paper, from a night when the lamp had burned low and her hand had ached. She lowered her eyes at once, bending over her needlework though the thread had knotted. Ashford excused himself from Lady Penbury with a murmur and crossed the space. His face was calm, but his eyes held a stillness she had not seen before. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, voice even, "may I have a word?" She set the work aside. "Of course." They moved toward the far end of the room near the shelves, where a globe stood between two chairs. The murmur of talk dulled. Eleanor felt the air thin in her chest. "That phrase," Ashford said. "You have used it before." "I speak in many phrases," she replied, aiming for lightness and missing. "So do we all," he said. "Yet some lines linger." He did not accuse. He did not smile. He only watched her. Eleanor forced her hands to rest still. "Perhaps I heard it somewhere," she said. "Perhaps," he answered. Silence stood between them. A log shifted in the grate with a soft crack. Someone laughed across the room. Eleanor felt the world tilt, just a little. Ashford bowed slightly. "Forgive me," he said. "I did not mean to interrupt your afternoon." "It is no matter," she said. He stepped back, then turned away. He did not look at her again before he left the room. Outside, the street felt colder than the day had promised. Ashford walked without haste, his steps steady, his face set. When he reached his lodgings, he went at once to his desk. He opened the case he had carried for days without touching and drew out the folded proof sheets. He smoothed them flat beneath the lamp. The paper bore the same dark line he had marked with his thumb before. The mask is not on the face. It is in the polite smile. He read it once, then again. The words did not blur or shift. They lay plain and sure. He leaned back in his chair, the lamplight sharp on his face. In his mind rose the image of Eleanor near the hearth, her voice light, her eyes bright with thought. The same line spoken without care, as if it lived close within her. Ashford closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them. He folded the pages with slow care and set them on the desk. His hands rested on the wood still. The room held no sound but the faint tick of the clock on the mantel. He did not speak. He did not move. The realization settled in him like a weight placed with quiet finality, and he sat beneath it, alone with the proof before him. Chapter 13. Ink-stained hands. Eleanor received his note at noon. It was brief and written in a steady hand. He asked if he might call that evening on a matter of some weight. She read it twice, then folded it with care and placed it on her desk beside the inkwell. Her fingers felt cold, though the day was mild. She knew the hour had come. When Thomas Ashford entered the parlour, Mrs. Whitcomb greeted him with her usual grace, then excused herself after a few polite exchanges, claiming a headache. The door closed, leaving Eleanor and Ashford alone in the quiet room. The fire burned low. The clock on the mantel ticked with small, exact sounds. Ashford did not sit at once. He stood near the hearth, hat in hand, his gaze steady but not hard. Eleanor rose from her chair and faced him, her hands clasped before her. She had not worn gloves. "I asked to speak with you in private," he said. "Yes," she replied. He drew a folded set of pages from his coat and laid them on the table between them. She did not need to see the print to know what they were. "I have followed a line of inquiry," he said. "It led me through shops and ledgers to these." He touched the pages lightly, and then to a phrase spoken in a warm room on an afternoon meant for light talk. Eleanor looked at the papers, then at him. Her heart beat so hard she thought she might sway. She had planned words in the night, shaped them with care. Now they felt simple and bare. "You may ask what you wish," she said. "Are you the writer who signs as Blackwood?" he asked. She could have turned away. She could have claimed chance, memory, some small lie to buy time. Instead, she held his gaze. "Yes," she said. The word fell quiet and firm. Ashford drew in a slow breath. He did not step back. "Why?" Eleanor's hands tightened together. "Because my father died and left debts he did not mean to leave. Because my brother makes errors that grow teeth. Because coal must be bought and bread must be paid for." Her voice did not rise. It stayed level, as if she spoke of mending a hem. "I had a skill. I used it." "You knew the sort of tales they were," he said. "I knew," she answered. "I also knew what the coins would do. I did not write to stir trouble. I wrote to keep this house standing." She glanced toward the door her mother had closed. It is work, Mr. Ashford. Ink and paper instead of needle and thread. He watched her, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now. You never thought to tell me. How could I? She asked. You speak against such work in print. You call it harm. I am not made of stone. I heard you. A silence fell, not empty but full. The clock ticked on. Eleanor felt the weight of it press on her chest, yet also a strange lightness. The truth stood between them now, plain as the pages on the table. My hands are not clean, she said softly. She lifted them a little, palms up. Faint dark marks still traced the skin near her fingers, but they have kept others from worse. Ashford looked at her hands, then at her face. His own hands tightened on his hat brim. He did not speak at once. The fire shifted, a small sound in the grate. I did not mean to deceive you, she added. I meant only to endure. Her voice held no plea, only fact. She stood straight, waiting for his judgment, her ink-stained hands open between them. Chapter 14. What is corruption? Thomas Ashford did not answer at once. Eleanor's words hung in the quiet room like breath on cold air. He moved to the chair at last and sat, hat resting on his knee, the proof sheet still on the table between them. The fire had sunk lower, its light more red than gold. All this time, he said slowly, I spoke of harm as if it moved only one way, from page to mind, from story to deed. He looked at the papers, then back at her. I did not ask what drove the hand that wrote. Eleanor remained standing, her fingers laced tight. Need drives many hands, she said. Yes, he replied. Need. The word sounded new in his mouth, as if he had not weighed it before. He rose and crossed to the window, though the glass showed only the dim street and a passing cart. I have walked through schools and homes, he went on. I have seen want. Yet I set it aside when I wrote. I made the page the villain because it was near and easy to name. Eleanor said nothing. She watched his back, the set of his shoulders no longer so firm. I thought, if I could quiet the stories, he said, the rest would mend. He let out a breath that might have been a soft laugh without joy. But the stories grow from the same soil as the trouble. Thin wages, cold rooms, empty tables. You did not make those? No, she said. He turned to face her. You met them as you could. I did, she answered. Ashford picked up the proof sheets and held them for a moment, then set them down again. I called this work a stain, he said. Yet I see now the stain lies deeper, in the ground itself. A tale may show a dark alley, but the alley stands whether told or not. Eleanor's hands loosened a little at her waist. I never wish to add to harm, she said. I believe you, he replied. The words came plain, without strain. I have been too sure of a single cause. I have not looked long enough at the frame that holds us all. The clock ticked on the mantel. A gust of wind brushed the window, a faint sound. Ashford moved back toward the table and rested his hand on the back of the chair. I cannot praise every line, he said. Some scenes cut deep. I know, she said. But I cannot call you corrupt, he finished. Not for this. Eleanor felt her breath ease, though the room still seemed fragile, as if one sharp word could break it. Thank you, she said, and the words carried more weight than any plea might have. Ashford gave a small nod. I have more to unlearn than I thought, he said, and less right to judge from a distance. He looked at her hands once more, then met her eyes. We both work with what we have. The fire gave a last small flare, then settled. Neither spoke for a moment. The quiet did not press now. It held, steady and shared. Chapter 15. A new byline. The presses at the London Standard turned before dawn, their steady rhythm carrying through the walls like a low pulse. Thomas Ashford stood beside the proof table with his coat on and his hat set aside, the final page of his leading article laid flat before him. The ink still shone in places. He had written late into the night, crossing out more lines than he kept. Now the piece sat quiet and plain, the tone firm but measured. He spoke of the power of stories, yes, but also of the weight borne by those who wrote to keep bread on the table. He named no one. He did not accuse. He asked instead that the city look not only at the page, but at the rooms where cold and want pressed hard. Mr. Colby read over his shoulder, brow furrowed. You have changed the ground, he said. "I've widened it," Ashford replied. Colby grunted, not pleased but not ready to fight. "It will stir talk." "Let it," Ashford said. He signed his name at the foot and handed the sheet to the runner. The boy took it at once, vanishing toward the press. Ashford watched him go, then turned to his desk and began the day's other work, the air around him feeling both lighter and more sharp, as if a window had been opened. Across town, Eleanor sat at her small desk with the morning light just touching the edge of the page. The room was quiet. Her mother had gone to call on a friend, Henry out early on some errand he swore would set matters right. Eleanor held a clean sheet before her, the pen resting between her fingers. No false name waited at the top, no borrowed mark. She wrote slowly, shaping each line with care. The story she set down still held tension, still moved with purpose, but she let more air into it, more space for breath between the turns. A knock sounded at the door below. The post had come. She rose and went down, heart quick. Among the letters lay a folded paper, the fresh number of the London Standard. She took it back upstairs and opened it on her desk. Her eyes found Ashford's piece at once. She read it through without stopping, her throat tight. When she reached the end, she sat back and closed her eyes for a brief moment, the paper resting beneath her hand. Later that week, she walked to Harrow's office in full daylight. The fog had lifted, the street clear. Harrow looked up as she entered. "You have the next part?" he asked. "I have something new," she said. She laid her pages on his desk. "Under my own name," he raised his brows. "That is a risk. So is the other," she replied. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We will see how it stands," he said. When she left, the sun felt warm on her face. She did not hurry. At the corner, she saw Ashford waiting, hat in hand. He fell into step beside her without a word. They walked together down the street, not touching, their pace matched. The city moved around them as it always had, carts rolling, vendors calling, doors opening and closing. Nothing grand marked the day. Yet something had shifted, quiet and real, like a line drawn not to divide but to guide. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions for stories you would like, comment them below. On the right is a video of mine. YouTube thinks you'll like. Watch it if you would like more of this content. Have happy dreams.